You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim. These are the headlines on the continent. Cameroon's government blames separatists for the killing of at least 7 school children in its restive anglophone region. The attack has been described as a terrorist act of unbearable cruelty and barbarity. Tanzanians head to the polls on Wednesday in an election set to be a litmus test of President John Magufuli's authoritarian style. And with Ivory Coast's presidential election less than a week away, our correspondents will bring you special coverage on the candidates running for office. Today we'll take a look at Conan Bertin, who's hoping to win over younger voters who make up 3/4 of the population. But first, the Cameroonian government has blamed separatists for what it describes as a terrorist act of unbearable cruelty and barbarity. At least 7 children in the country's anglophone region were killed in the English-speaking southwest. The government said 13 children had also been wounded when gunmen attacked the bilingual school in the town of Kumba. Laurent Berstecker has this report.
A city mourning its fallen children. Kumba residents held an emotional march on Sunday following a deadly school attack that's left the country reeling with shock and horror.
Like a father, I think I would not have remained indifferent when I saw their lifeless bodies lying in the mortuary.
A group of men armed with guns and machetes stormed the private Mother Francisca Academy on Saturday before opening fire on teachers and pupils. As soon as she heard the gunshots, Isabel Dione rushed to the school to find her 12-year-old daughter injured and crying for help.
And right now like this, I don't think even my children can ever be educated again.
Claude Ngwane saw the men drive towards the school before the shooting started. His daughter, 12-year-old Rennie, was hit by a bullet and died from her wounds on Sunday. For this grieving father, the government's inability to deal with escalating separatist violence in the region is largely to blame.
With this situation, I not understand. The government not do well. Yes, I blame mostly the government. Because if the government don't stand up, say, this thing they should know fit. Let the government talk.
Since 2017, unrest in Cameroon's 2 anglophone regions over alleged discrimination by the French-speaking community has spiraled into violence. The conflict has already killed more than 3,000 people and forced over 500,000 to flee their homes. No group has claimed responsibility for Saturday's attack, which Cameroon's government has blamed on secessionist terrorists.
Well, let's turn to some other stories making news on the continent this hour. And huge crowds have ransacked food warehouses in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Residents accusing officials of hoarding government supplies meant for the poor during lockdown. But state governors say the food was put in reserve in case of a second wave. The widespread pillaging follows days of rioting sparked by the shooting of unarmed protesters in Lagos. Amnesty International says at least 12 people were killed. Last Tuesday's peaceful demos against police brutality erupted into one of the biggest challenges to the nation's ruling elite in years. Next, a breakthrough has been made in the unsolved case of a murdered South African football star. Police arrested 5 suspects over the 2014 shooting of national football captain Senzo Meyiwa. The 27-year-old goalkeeper had been gunned down in the southeast of Johannesburg. Until now, police had failed to find the killers, sparking accusations of incompetence. But a newly appointed cold case unit found the murder weapon and linked it back to the crime scene. The discovery leading to the arrests exactly 6 years after Meyiwa's murder. And in what's been called a major milestone for Seychelles democracy, the first president to come from the opposition has taken office. Wavel Ramkalawan defeated incumbent Danny Faure in the first round of last week's election. The Anglican priest turned head of state, proving it's actually 6th time lucky after 5 failed presidential bids. He's vowed to fight drug trafficking in the country with the world's highest per capita rate of heroin addiction, as well as boost Seychelles' crippled tourist-dependent economy. Well, there's more election coverage, this time in Tanzania, with voters heading to the polls on Wednesday in an election set to be a litmus test of President John Magufuli's authoritarian style. Although Tanzania's economy has been buoyant, some are sounding the alarm after a 5-year crackdown on the opposition and freedom of speech. Nicolas Jamin has this report.
John Magufuli is 60 years old, but he wants to show he still has the energy for another term. During his mandate, Tanzania was upgraded to lower middle-income status by the World Bank. His critics say he's become increasingly authoritarian, while his supporters appreciate his tough stance on corruption.
Kuchagua viongozi watakaoendelea kusimamia umoja na mshikamano wa Watanzania kama ulivyoachwa na baba wa taifa marehemu Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Uchaguzi huu pia utatufanya ama kuwachagua watu wenye nia ya kutuvuruga umoja na mshikamano wetu au kuligawa taifa letu vipande vipande kwa misingi ya ukabila.
The main opposition candidate is Tundu Lissu. He only returned to Tanzania in July. Lissu spent 3 years abroad recovering from 16 bullet wounds. His ally said he was the victim of a politically motivated assassination attempt in Tanzania in 2017. During this campaign, Lissu said his supporters were repeatedly tear-gassed.
The kind of violence that we are seeing, we're beginning to see, is different. This time, the regime is scared, and they are going to be very, very violent, because in a free and fair election, we will win fair and square.
It was only in 1995 that Tanzania held its first multi-party polls. Since then, Magufuli's ruling party has never lost an election.
Well, it's time now for a special segment on upcoming elections in Ivory Coast. Well, up next, we have a special report from our correspondents. They've been meeting with the presidential candidates ahead of October 31st ballot. First up is Kwadwo Konan Bertin, affectionately known as Kakabe. This is his second time running for the presidency. Now, compared to the likes of Alassane Ouattara, Henri Konan Bédié and Pascal Affingessen, Kakabe is a relative outsider. But as the youngest candidate at 52 years old, he believes he has a chance of winning the youth vote. Take a look.
Night had fallen by the time the youngest candidate made his appearance. Kwadwo Konan Bertin, nicknamed Kakabe, met with a few hundred young people. He thinks that at 52 years old he has a good chance of capturing the youth vote in a population where 2/3 of the people are younger than 25.
Et le chemin le plus sûr, c'est de vous mobiliser tous les jeunes de Côte d'Ivoire derrière ma candidature pour que nous puissions chasser Alassane Ouattara le 31.
He casts himself as an alternative to the three men that have governed since the 90s, all of whom are over 75.
On ne va pas nous manipuler éternellement comme ça. Qu'est-ce qu'on nous propose? Qu'est-ce qu'on nous donne? La guerre des échos. Bédié, Gbagbo, Ouattara, Bédié, Gbagbo, Ouattara. Et quand on va se lever, les pro-Gbagbo, les pro-Bédié, les pro-Ouattara.
This sentiment hits the nail on the head for some.
Il faudrait qu'on ait un président jeune. Tu pourras aider la jeunesse, qui pourra nous aider à travailler.
Only Ouattara and Kakabe are actually campaigning. The other two candidates are boycotting the electoral process. His detractors accuse him of being manipulated by the president, receiving payments to make the race seem credible.
Ils le disent sans jamais apporter les preuves. C'est du mépris. C'est ce qui les caractérise. Le chien peut aboyer, la caravane Kakabe avance.
Having split from the PDCI, many in his former party consider him a traitor. He now risks splitting their vote. When he ran for president in 2015, less than 4% cast their ballot for Kakabe. He will clearly be looking to do better this time around.
Now, while the average age of Ivory Coast presidential candidates is just over 70 years old, 3 out of 4 Ivorians are under 35. Our correspondents asked 2 young people from different walks of life whether they feel represented by the political class and what their hopes and dreams are going into this presidential race. Sam Bradpeace and Thais Brook report.
They're both Ivorians in their early 20s, but that's where the similarities end. Ange Carole is a law student and wants to spend a fruitful career defending and pushing for women's rights. Today, Ivorian politics is very much a male-dominated affair.
In our African societies, women generally are not encouraged to speak up, especially in public. They can be shut down or threatened when they try to enter the political sphere, which is dominated by men.
Ange Carole is an MP in the country's youth parliament, a body that tries to shape the Ivory Coast of tomorrow. Today, she has gathered other young women to a discussion group and explains why she decided to take on the role.
I saw the tribal realities with customs such as FGM and forced marriage.
With the election fast approaching, she has a message to pass on.
We should watch and listen carefully. Who has policies for women? Who has projects for the youth? Projects that will help us. That will decide how we vote.
But the 4 presidential candidates are men with an average age of 70. Many young women do not feel represented.
For me, in any case, this whole election, I don't want women to intervene at all. Let the men do what they want.
Many young Ivorians share this point of view. Romaric is 21 and rents a small room in this shared courtyard. He's originally from Bonduku, a small town in the north of the country.
I came to Abidjan to search for work. In Bonduku, there were no opportunities.
He has launched his own business here, selling iced juice drinks next to schools. He manages to earn about 20 euros a day. He certainly knows how to hustle, but when it comes to politics, he's simply not interested.
Whoever the president is, it won't change anything, so we'll accept anything. Whoever wins will win.
Romaric believes he can only count on himself. Ange Carole wants to change the world. While they have little in common, they do share one concern: fear of violence come election day.
And there's more news up next. Stay tuned here on France 24.
The U.S. presidential election is just around the corner, and rarely has the nation been so divided. To take the pulse of the country, we're going to take you on a road trip to 6 key swing states that will be critical in determining who ends up in the White House. Join us for American Views, where we'll travel some 10,000 kilometers around the country to see how everyday Americans feel about this crucial moment.
American Views, to watch on France 24 and France24.com.
I'm Natalie Savaricas, and you'll usually find me in news, reporting on Greece's enduring financial turmoil and protests, but also the refugee emergency, here on France 24.
Natalie Savaricas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.